should we pay Caesar these taxes? Meaning, should we take what's ours and give it to Caesar? Jesus' answer is, whose face is on this? Oh, Caesar's? We'll give back to Caesar's what's his. You see the difference? Here's the question. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Should we pay them or should we not? So there's the question. And it's a thorny question. We can recognize right away that it's a thorny question. Nobody wants to pay taxes. Anybody really thrilled about April 15th and paying taxes? Nobody wants to do that. People in Jesus' day were just like people today. We don't want to pay these taxes. And so the question here is a thorny one, and we can see on its surface just what a clever design it is to ask Jesus such a question in the presence of the Herodians and the Pharisees, not to say all the other people that are around Jesus. All those people around Jesus who themselves have strong opinions about the Roman government and the taxes that they pay. And so here Jesus they're trying to put him on the spot. They're trying to back him into a corner, give us an answer, yes or no. Is it right or is it wrong to pay these taxes? So let's just talk for a little bit about these taxes that they pay, and let's just try to come to some understanding of just how offensive, what a difficult issue this was for the Israelite to think through. Because it's a question that goes deeper than just, do we like the Roman government? Is the Roman government treating us fairly? Are these taxes being used wisely? And are the taxes too high? It's really a much deeper question than that. Because the question really has within it an element of, well, is it right for a godless pagan nation to yoke the people of God in order to do their work for them? Because that's really what's happening here. The Romans taxed people in various ways. And as we've mentioned before, the predominant way of gaining tax income in the Roman Empire was to tax travel. So when people were traveling the Roman roads, we've all heard about the Roman roads and the quality and the safety of the Roman roads. Well, those roads weren't free. And so those roads were heavily taxed when you used them, and they generated a great deal of income for the Roman Empire. But the Romans also taxed just beyond the use of roads and the use of infrastructure. They also taxed land, property, and they taxed people. And so the theological issue really came to bear when the ancient Israelite would think of it in terms like this. Is it right for a godless pagan Caesar to use the promised land of God to fund their pagan empire? And so when you think of it in those terms, it becomes a more difficult theological question, doesn't it? Is it right for the pagan Caesar to yoke the promised people of God, the chosen people of God, in order to fund their pagan empire? That's a little bit different than taxing your labor or taxing your travel. That's taxing you. That's taxing the promised land itself. And so that was really a wide open door for them to swing this door open before Jesus and say, Jesus, we really have got you on this issue because nobody else is really agreeing upon this. This is an issue that's really to the core of the fabric of our nation, in which people just find it a really difficult time to come together on this issue. So let's put you in the corner. Let's put you on the spot. What do you say? Is it lawful to pay these taxes or not? So the taxes that they're referring to are, let's talk for just a minute about these specific taxes. This was a head tax. In fact, in the passage, when we read that word taxes, is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar? That word taxes is the same word as census. And so what this is a census tax. So the tax that he's referring to is the tax that began in Luke chapter 2. We all remember Luke chapter 2. That when all the world went to be registered, it was the first year of Quirinius, who was the governor of Syria. All right? That's the tax that's being referred to. I want to take this opportunity to spend maybe about 90 seconds or so, maybe 2 minutes, just to tell you some background about that tax that will, well, maybe be a little bit surprising to us, but hopefully overall this will be helpful. Because what I want to do is I want to show to us a difficulty in the Scriptures that we don't have a solution for. And you might say, well, why are we talking about that on Sunday morning? A difficulty in the Scriptures that we don't have a solution for? It's to know and to have confidence. Our confidence is in the Scriptures, not in the archaeological evidence. I'm always quick to point out all these instances that we come across in Mark's Gospel in which archaeologists have said this that contradicts the scriptural account, but they're not looking at this properly, or they've not regarded this evidence, or they've not regarded this solution. And here's this solution explains it all. I'm quick to point those out. I also want to be transparent to point out those times when we come across one in which we don't have a solution, in which there's not a solution that's apparent to us. And one of the big ones is the tax that was imposed that was connected to Jesus' birth. So Matthew, in Matthew's gospel, tells us that Jesus was born when Herod was king. We assume that means Herod the Great, although it could mean his son Herod Archelaus, but it probably means Herod the Great, because we remember the whole story of Herod the Great killing the Jewish boys and that sort of thing. So Matthew tells us that Jesus was born when Herod was king. Herod died in 4 BC. Luke tells us that Mary and Joseph traveled to Bethlehem because it was the first year that Quirinius was governor of Syria. Quirinius became governor of Syria in 6 AD. That's a difference of 10 years. And therein lies our problem. Because Matthew's putting Jesus' birth at a point that's about 10 years earlier than Luke appears to put Jesus' birth. Furthermore, there's other difficulties with the census that Luke is speaking of, this registering of all people. First of all, Luke references Quirinius, who is governor of Syria. Well, the governor of Syria had no authority in Judea to collect taxes. And so it's a bit of a mystery why Luke is referring to Quirinius of Syria, who had nothing to do with Judea's taxes anyway. Furthermore, perhaps a little bit bigger problem is that there is no evidence of the Roman Empire ever exacting a tax in which people had to travel to their homeland to be registered for that tax. So there's a few problems there that really don't have a good solution to them. There's solutions that are offered, but quite honestly, they're not completely satisfactory. For one solution that's offered is, I think it's probably the most common one, is that the census that was completed in the first year of Quirinius' rule, 6 AD, was begun much earlier, and it took a number of years to complete it. That kind of makes sense, and that could help to harmonize some of the evidence. But the point is, I want to point all this out to say the Scriptures are never in contradiction. If we have all the evidence, if we have all the archaeological and historical evidence, we see that they're never in contradiction. The problem is, our knowledge of the ancient world is far from complete. Don't ever turn on the History Channel and be fooled into thinking that we have a complete, thorough, gapless knowledge of the ancient world. It's a long ways from that. Our knowledge of ancient history contains many such gaps. And when we come across a situation such as this, we say, well, there's not a clear archaeological solution to the difficulty presented in Scripture. Our response is, well, if we had all the evidence, if we knew all the evidence, the answer would be clear. I think back to just a few years ago, maybe more than a few years ago now, but you might remember the big hubbub that was circling around King David, and how people were saying, there's no historical evidence that there ever was a King David, until there was evidence that was found of the historical King David. So a lot of times it's just a matter of saying we don't have all the evidence. But then ultimately it's a matter of saying our trust is not in archaeology, our trust is in the Scriptures. Right now we recognize there's this difficulty and we don't have a great solution for it right now, but our trust is still in the Scriptures. I say all that now because this is the census tax that Jesus is talking about. This is the very same one. The census tax that, according to Luke, begun with Jesus' birth. That was the situation for Mary and Joseph going to Bethlehem, was the very same tax that they come to Jesus now to say, is it right to pay this tax or not? This particular tax had created a great deal of strife in ancient Israel. You may remember from Acts chapter 5, we look in Acts chapter 5 at that situation that's narrated to us in verse 37. After him, Judas the Galilean rose up in the days of the census, same word, in the days of the census, and drew away some of the people after him, he too perished. So this tax was the impetus for at least one armed revolt. That's what a big deal this particular tax was. And it's this tax that they come to Jesus and say, Jesus, is it right for the Caesar to tax Israelites simply because we're alive? That's what it's a head count tax. They're being taxed simply because they're alive and they live in the Roman jurisdiction. Is that right, Jesus, to be taxed in that way? We can kind of understand the taxes on moving animals down the road or driving a cart down the Roman road. We can kind of understand those taxes, though we don't like them. This is simply a tax because we're Israelites. Is that right or is that wrong? Should we pay them or should we not? Verse 15. But knowing their hypocrisy. Knowing their hypocrisy. You know, it's one thing to know that somebody's flattering you. It's another thing to know their heart and to know their hypocrisy. But knowing their hypocrisy, he said to them, why put me to the test? We've noticed before, for example, in chapter 10, that they come to Jesus. Chapter 8. Verse 11, the Pharisees came and began to argue with him, seeking from him a sign from heaven to test him. Or chapter 10, same thing, in order to test him. So it's as though Jesus is saying to them, how long are you going to keep doing this? How long are you going to keep coming to me to test me with these silly riddles of yours because you're not going to trap me in my words? So why put me to the test? Think back there for just one quick moment. Think back to Jesus' words back in chapter 1 when he goes to the tempter in the wilderness and he says to the tempter, do not put the Lord your God to the test. Do you see how Mark is comparing for us? He's making for us this parallel comparison between the religious rulers who are in charge of the temple and the demons. You see that? Last time we noticed the comparison in the sense that just like the demons knew who Jesus was, and yet they still hated him. In the passage last time, the parable, Jesus made it so very plain who he is with the donkey and who they are. And now, knowing him, seeing that, recognizing that, they hate him. So Mark is drawing this parallel between the temple rulers and the demons. Why put me to the test? Bring me a denarius and let me look at it. So then Jesus says, bring the coin, the denarius. We're probably familiar with the denarius, and let me look at it. So then they bring him the denarius. They brought him a coin. Notice there, we'll come back to this, but notice that they had one. Notice Jesus didn't have one and that they did have one. So they bring him one and he holds it up. Whose likeness and inscription is this? They say to him, Caesar's. So just a word or two about the denarius. If you'll advance to the next slide, we can actually see a denarius. This is a denarius that would have been identical to the denarius that Jesus was handed. In fact, there is even a minuscule chance that this is the one, but it would have been identical to this. And you can see on the coin that we've got two faces here. And so Jesus would have held it up, turned it around. He would have said, whose face is this? Whose image is this? And they say Caesar's. And he turns it around. Whose inscription is this? So you see the writing around the edges. That writing is a little bit confusing because unlike our coins, you read those coins counterclockwise. Our coins you read clockwise, but you read these counterclockwise. The inscription on the face side is this: Ti Caesar Div Aug F Augustus. That's short for Tiberius Caesar Divi or Divine Augusti Filius Augustus. What that literally means is Tiberius Caesar, who was the Caesar at the time, Divine Great One, F meaning Filius or son of Augustus, the Great One. So in essence it's saying the at least semi-divine Tiberius Augustus, son of the divine Augustus. On the back, you see the woman here. That woman is clearly dressed like a priestess. And the inscription around that reads Pontifex Maximus. You can see there the letters Pontiff Maxim. Pontifex Maximus, which means literally high priest. So on the face you have son of the divine one, Tiberius. On the other side you have high priest. Can you get a sense of how offensive that coin would have been to the Jew? It was literally a pocket idol. It was literally a pocket coin designed to say the most offensive, the most deeply offensive things to the religious Jew of Jesus' day. And so they bring him this denarius, this most offensive coin, and he holds it up. And you can see from the image there, he would hold it up and he would show maybe the face. He would say, whose face is this? And he'd turn it around. And he'd say, what does that inscription say? And then his answer is, of course, the words that we know, render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's and to God's the things that are God's. So he points out the face on the coin and he points out the inscription and they answer correctly. This is all Caesar's face. This is Caesar's inscription. And he says, render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's. One important thing to note here is that Jesus changed the word. So the question they come to Jesus with is, should we pay taxes to Caesar? Jesus' answer ultimately is, pay the tax to Caesar? No, he says, render unto Caesar. Now, render is a word that we don't often use. It's sort of one of those words that you don't hear in everyday talk. But the word render is not the same word as the word that they use. Now, granted, the conversation between Jesus and these Pharisees is almost certainly not taking place in Greek. But also granted that Mark is faithfully translating from most likely the Aramaic that was spoken, or possibly the Hebrew, but most likely the Aramaic. He's faithfully translating into the Greek. And in that faithful translation is a marked change in words. The question is, should we pay the tax? Jesus says, render to Caesar's what's his. So the word pay, that's translated pay, means just what it sounds like. It means to take something that's yours and give it to somebody. That's what you do when you pay. When you give, it's just the standard word for give. If I were to reach in my pocket and pull out something that's in my pocket, let's see what's in my pocket, some keys. If I were to take out some keys that are mine and give these keys to you, then I am doing just that, pay or give them to you. But then once they're in your possession, if you were to give them back to me, then that's the word render or give back or literally pay back. It's very important that Jesus changed the word because they ask him, should we pay Caesar these taxes? Meaning, should we take what's ours and give it to Caesar? Jesus' answer is, whose face is on this? Oh, Caesar's? We'll give back to Caesar's what's his. You see the difference? And do you see how Jesus is directing the conversation from a conversation that is basically, can Caesar take what's mine? To Jesus' answer is, well, why don't you give back to Caesar what was his to start with? And that's going to be the basis of how we understand Jesus' words. Render to Caesar what is his. Are you using his road? Did he pay for that road? Then give back to him what is owed for that. Are you using his bridges? Is your life safer now because of the Roman army who now prevents all this bandit thievery on the road to Jericho? Are you benefiting from that? Then pay back to him what he has given to you. He even has his face on the coin. You've even got his coin in your pocket. So clearly you're using his coin. Give it back to him. That's the essence of Jesus' point, is render back, to give back what has been given to you. If you have benefited from the Roman Empire, then pay back what is owed for the benefit that you have received. So Jesus refuses to be conned into this, should we give Caesar our money? Give back to him what is due for what you have received and what you continue to receive from the Roman authorities, from the wisdom that they're exercising in their government, pagan though they may be. They have nonetheless created a society that's safer, commerce is greater, infrastructure is increased. All of these things were funded by the Roman Empire. Pay back to them what has been given to you as benefit.